Absolutely. I'd love to welcome everybody here to our third event of our Shires month at Quinlan and Fabish and Windy City Trombones. We're so excited to have Joe Alessi here to speak with us. We've got a wide variety of music educators, performers here, just ready to ask questions. And really, it's just going to be an informal kind of not just a talk, a roundtable discussion. We'd love to pick if any we're going to pick anybody's brain. We want to pick the best. So we so happy to have Joe here. Thank you to the SE Shires company for their wonderful support, Quinlan and Fabish and George Quinlan and the Quinlan family. And then again, I'm Kevin at Windy City Trombones. So thank you all for joining us on Facebook as well. Please feel free to like us on Facebook. That helps us grow and let you guys know when we have more exciting events. But yeah, that's tonight's format. But Sam, why don't you go ahead and...
Yeah, sure. So my name is Samantha Lane, and I am the Director of Sales and Marketing at the SE Shires Company. My colleagues Matt Nishida and Jeff Christian are also on tonight's broadcast, and so we're all thrilled to be involved and to welcome you here tonight. Tonight really is special. This is such a treat. We have a really great collection of music educators and performers, the whole gamut. But on this call with us here, in addition to everybody else who's watching on Facebook, it's going to be really interesting, really dynamic. We'll be taking some questions from the people who are on the Zoom call. We're also going to be taking some questions from those of you watching on Facebook. So please feel free to write your questions in the Facebook chat. And for our visitors here in this Zoom link, you can write your questions in the chat and we'll queue them up. You can ask them live if you'd like. Just a reminder, we're doing a really wonderful giveaway, and it's a very exciting raffle. So everybody who's watching, whether you're in the Zoom link or you're watching on Facebook, you can register at www.seshires.com/WCTB, so Windy City Trombone. I did link that in the Facebook comments, so feel free to just go and click that link. We're doing a handful of raffles for some swag items. We have these handy dandy Alessi scale up and excerpt up practice tools. So those are going to be in the raffle. Joe's got one right here. And then the grand prize, the person who wins the whole thing, is going to win a free and virtual lesson with Mr. Alessi himself. So it's a pretty fun giveaway. It's free to enter. So seshires.com/WCTB. But from here, I think if everybody's okay with it, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Alessi. And tonight's format, we're talking a lot about teaching and pedagogy and that type of influence for a young player all the way throughout their training. So getting to hear from you, Joe, maybe a little bit about yourself, but also your own experiences as a player.
Sure. Well, thank you. Thank you to George and to Kevin and to Samantha for inviting me tonight and to be amongst all my colleagues here from the Midwest. I was born in Detroit, so have a lot of Midwest relatives. So I'm one of you, don't forget. And and I heard that a lot of our panel here are educators, and a lot of them are middle school band directors. And ironically, when my father left New York and went out to California, he became a middle school band director. That was one of the things he did. And then a junior college band director. So he loved conducting bands, and probably I'll do something similar down the road. I love to conduct and work with groups. Right now I work, a lot with the Juilliard Trombone Choir and conduct there and learn how to be a mediocre conductor. But all right, so yeah, this is not, I don't want to talk about myself too much, but just about concepts, about teaching. And every time you teach a lesson, you learn something more about how to teach, because there's every student is different and they bring a different set of problems, and you want to be helpful. And I don't profess to have all the answers, but I do know some things regarding a little bit about how to teach. Now, speaking of my father, he was an amazing brass teacher. And listening to him teach all the time, he was very confident on how he delivered his message. And I think that's very important, that it was reassuring when he taught me. He was, you got to do it this way. This is the way you got to do it, and when you start out, if I were to start out a beginner, I would do it just the way that he did it. He showed me how to make the embouchure, the key elements, corners, a triangle, flat chin. These are things that, obviously you all know out there. But he had a mirror in the studio. He always had me look in the mirror and watch. And to this day, you can't see it, but right to the right of me, there's a giant, 4-foot mirror. So I'm always, if I have a practice room that I practice in, I always go to the mirror and just watch what's going on. So anyway, what else did he teach me? He taught me a lot. He taught me about rhythm right away. The only way to play quarter note and 2/8 was this way: bum, 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 like that. And the way he would say it and convey how it goes, I was stuck in my mind forever. But it was very, just this is the way it goes. And you could not get away with rushing at all. So rushing is something that just, I would say, destroys a lot of progress, mainly because everything is timed. Everything has to be timed perfectly with your slide, your air, and your tongue all together. And if you start rushing, then you don't really learn it. And I find that when people students play something, when they start to rush, that's when they start to make mistakes. And they're learning, they don't digest the learning process. Learning process is sort of superficial. So I'm when I teach, I make sure that the students don't rush. I always let them know when they rush, but they have to teach themselves too. So yeah, I don't want to be a drill sergeant. They have to be able to teach themselves. So that's how, maybe in the last 20 years of teaching, I've really put the onus on the student to learn themselves. And I ask them to sing and conduct. That's the standard thing when I teach. So, I had a student today, this young kid from Buffalo. I asked him, I think he was maybe a junior in high school or something like that. But had him conduct, say, do you know how to conduct? He says, yes, we conduct in chorus. So he's in a choir, I believe, and they have everybody get up and conduct the chorus as part of their learning. So he was perfect. He knew how to conduct. So I teach all my students to conduct 4/4 time, 3/4 time, maybe a little bit of 5/8 here and there. And then I have them sing, and said, please sing this. Now, just the other day, we had I'm just going from one thing to another here, but just concepts that are come up. But just the other day, we did a low brass class and at Juilliard Live, and the students decided to surprise me, and they sang a barbershop quartet. Okay. And that's one of the things I do at the end of the school year, okay, is everybody has to go into groups and sing barbershop quartets. And so, and just to, reveal your musicianship. And because you can hide behind an instrument very easily. So anyway, so this one student sang in this group in this barbershop quartet. I didn't know they were going to do that, and I was kind of shocked. But it came time to do I think he was singing the baritone part, and his minor seventh, dominant seventh chord, and his minor seventh was very high. And when he resolved it to the major third, that was high also. And I said, did you hear that? I said, oh, no. So, okay, let me sing. So I went in the group and sang, and his assignment from that was to record all the parts himself. So, just that's what his assignment was. And you know, and sure enough, he did it. He recorded it and did all the parts. It was a little bit better, and for sure, but it still was a little high. So anyway, as far as intonation is concerned, I just call myself intonation police at Juilliard. So I'm, you know, if there's something that's out of tune, I constantly, you know, correct that right in the lesson. Now I ask them people to sing it, of course, but I think the fact that I'm constantly correcting the intonation, it's sort of, they begin to memorize the place where it is, you know, and sometimes it takes 20 tries or 30 tries or 30 reminders on one note. You know, especially the most often played out of tune notes, which are the F partial, you know, F above the staff and down, F, E, D flat, or E flat and D. I'm especially sensitive to that because, wow, around the world, people play all these notes sharp. And even I catch myself playing these notes sharp as well. And so it's something that you just can't remind the students enough about. Now, Tim asked me to talk a little bit about timing and what I do for that. So again, when I taught the lesson, it's fresh on my mind, and I talked about this. What was the student playing? A Voxman, I believe. I love this book in case you would like to show your young trombone students something interesting to play. The Voxman 60 selected etudes. I'm sure you all know that. I wasn't familiar with that book until maybe, well, this last couple of years. So a book I never used. And so I playing, one of the things during the pandemic, I'm just looking in my etude folder on Dropbox, and there's tons of etudes on there that I've never played. I started messing around with the Slama etudes. And anyway, so he asked me about this. He asked me about his well, two things happened. One was the legato was not happening, and also his articulation timing. As far as the legato is concerned, I'd like to just talk about that. And he used a lot of, when he did legato, he used a lot of tongue to do it, which I personally don't agree with. So I have all my young students learn legato and use natural slurs when they can. Okay. Now, there's a reason for that. And I would like to talk to all of you about that right now. So, first of all, number one, when you use natural slurs, it promotes airflow. I think it promotes embouchure development more quickly. You actually have a more knowledge about what can be done and can't be done on the trombone. Okay, so I've had a couple cases where I've taught some master classes and somebody's using legato tongue all the time, and then I ask them to use natural slurs, and they don't know how to do it because they don't know what are the possibilities. Can you slur from F to A? They're not even aware of that. So, and then they have to learn the instrument in a whole new way. So certainly, for myself, I use some legato tongue when I play. Occasionally, I'll sprinkle it in there here and there if it facilitates the passage. I'm working on this new concerto, this Chick Corea trombone concerto right now, and I have a lot of decisions to make in this piece. You know, whether I'm going to use a natural slur or not. But fundamentally, 90% of my options are natural slurs. So my advice to professors is to have your students first learn natural slurs and get them to get them to understand what happens with that. And certainly in the upper register, if you have students who play in the upper register, the air is moving faster. And so if we were to interrupt that airstream with a legato tongue where you could simply slur it, that's not a good idea, because at the air, when you interrupt that airstream at that speed, you're going to hear it, and I can always pick out somebody who plays with tongue all the time. There's just something about it. It may be all matched up, but it sounds wrong to me. So it's just, it just sounds notey to me, and I don't hear that wonderful flow into the next note. And that's it, airflow. I like to hear the airflow. If it was an octave slur, for instance, in Zarathustra in the Strauss big passage, some people will use a tongue for that, but I like, there's something very courageous sounding about a brass player making a slur up and a slur down. So more natural slurs, and blow through the bottom note was always something that my father said, when you go for an upper note, it's the bottom note that's important. And just to talk about that briefly, I don't know, I don't even think anybody told me this, but I came up with my own mental image of that. You stand on a diving board, on a spring-loaded diving board, and you're ready to jump off as a little kid. Remember that time? And your first motion is to go down. Okay, so this loads the spring up, and then it's easy. You just jump up. So I give the students that kind of image to follow. Now, for yes.
Hey, Joe. No, I was just going to say, I hate to jump in. We're
Yeah.
getting some really fantastic questions too.
Okay.
So at some point, let me know
Yeah.
when it's a good time for you, and I'll start.
Yes, I'm going
Is that okay?
talk about the timing thing, and then
Do
we'll
it. Yeah.
come on there. But now, here's my vision about legato, and I'm sure you all agree with this, but a lot of students don't know this, or they so I love using a chalkboard in lessons. Okay, it's great. I put all kinds of images up there and little things, and sometimes some funny things, but I like to just draw a note, okay, and then not on the staff, but just on the board, a circle, and then draw another circle about 1 foot away. And I said, okay, this is a D and this is an E, okay? So in legato playing, when should you move the slide? Now, most people get this right, but sometimes they don't. They say, oh, you have to move it right away. No, no, you don't want to do that. Move the slide right against the note that you're going to, okay? And when I teach the legato tongue, I always start having the students sing. What I really do is I play, for that particular subject, I play the role of the student, and I have the teacher, the student play the role of the teacher. So I ask them questions. Now, how do you do legato tongue? Well, you use the syllable da. Okay, you mean like this, da 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 da, like that? No, and it goes, and then we have this dialogue, and anyway. So what I do is I like to teach teaching legato tongue just with the ah syllable first. Have them sing ah like this, ah, and then say the consonant. But if the consonant is not da, we'd like to think it is, it's something else. They have to kind of rewrite the alphabet to really figure out what used to be is. Okay, so what is the actual place of the tongue? But to me, it's between a D and an N, I would say, somewhere in there. So ah, da, da, and then I show them visually what's happening with the tongue. So you're just kind of brushing the roof of the mouth. So I explain that like this, kind of very lightly. And so it's not any kind of striking that's going on. And I show them, the place where it is, and where the location is. And we work a lot on that just to get that right. And I say, I just tell them, I tell them that think of it as one note, one giant note. And keep thinking about the vowel. Don't think too much about the consonant, but the vowel should be predominant when you think of your legato. So the timing is that for the slide, and I use I like to use technology to examine, Bordoni's, just like my teacher did with me. My teacher played in the Chicago Symphony, Glenn Dotson. One of the first lessons I had with him in Philadelphia was he had a reel-to-reel machine, and he recorded me at 7.5 inches per second, and then he flipped the switch, and we went down to 3 3/4. And first time I ever heard myself in that speed, and just absolutely astonishing what I heard. And so I like to use this for teaching, to have your students record something and play it back at half speed. Very, very useful for teaching, and really wakes you up and sobers you up fast as a trombonist. So anyway, now as far as the staccato, this is the exercise that I showed the students. So I'll take my wonderful Q series trombone here. So unlike legato playing, where you have to move the slide as late as possible, I encourage the slide to move as early as possible. Okay. And here's my thought on this. Okay. So your tongue can go like this. Okay. Now to think about your slide keeping up with that is really mind-blowing. Okay. But especially if you're going back and forth, and that's a whole nother subject, back and forth playing with your slide. But so we got to get the slide to arrive on time. Okay. And that's part of the problem why, staccato playing doesn't sound clean. It's because the slide is not there in time. Okay. So we want to encourage that, and we just do a little exercise like this. And I call it maybe some of you have heard me talk about this, but it's called the hot note exercise. Okay. So this microphone is hot and I don't know about it. I go like that. I remember getting burned once when I was a kid, and how quickly you react. And, and so what we do is just create that little exercise. So just play very short. I would recommend not having the student readjust the embouchure or breathe or anything. Like this. So I call it, the note is hot, and then you move to the next position as soon as possible. And the next thing I tell them to do, it's just very simple. Now you're going to play your scale like normal length and so forth, but you're going to keep that same feel. Keep the same feel. That's all. You don't have to explain to them, move the slide fast, just the feel. And right. And so, so that's I've had tremendous success with just that little exercise, just like that. Does that sort of answer your question, Tim? I know that's
nope. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd clarify. So thank you.
Okay. Good. Yeah, and again, this is a great panel here. So please chime in whenever you want. Any comments or questions?
Yeah, let me pitch a question to you, Joe. And actually, I'll let Brian himself do it if you're cool with it, Brian. Brian, if you wanna, take yourself off. Cool.
Sure. So hi, I have a student, very advanced. He's in 9th grade, and he's a principal of the Chicago Youth Symphony Orchestra. And it's a little tricky to teach him as well as I used to over Zoom. I've been teaching him for about 3 years. And I'm wondering if you have any advice for how I can encourage him to get as good as he possibly can without discouraging him.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. Now, I am teaching a 15-year-old kid right now. He's, so I relate these questions to my own students and some pitfalls. There are pitfalls to teaching young students, and you got to be careful. So you want to work and have them introduce repertoire and so forth. So this kid is 15. He's from Beijing. Okay, he's absolutely phenomenal and smart, very smart. Asks a lot of questions. Very inquisitive. I think that's a sign of also of a great student. Any great students I've had, they've asked so many questions that, come on, get away, you're bothering me. So many questions. No, but it's that's a sign of somebody who's really gung ho, and so this kid, unfortunately, he's 15. He can play in the upper register, and I said, okay, let's have him try bolero. Okay, but that was a mistake. Okay, so the mistake was I wasn't there with him, to supervise him, and he so on the lesson yesterday he had his lip was swollen, and I said, no, so you have to teach kids, hey, to stop or know when you're going to hurt yourself, and that's very important, I think. So I said, listen, I don't want you to play now for, you can play again when the swelling goes down and when the pain goes away. And he said, okay. And said, and also put ice on it, and put some ice on it in the morning and ice on it at night. And so I'm sure he'll be fine. He's a young kid. But you have to sort of know when to teach the kids, hey, don't practice emotionally. Try to practice, very carefully, and maybe recognize when you're forcing, so some kids do have to be told that. So anyway, this is what he does. He writes a lesson report. I wanted to share that with you. Okay, so this is a 15-year-old kid, and you can see. So all my students have to do lesson reports. I don't know why it's blue there, but and what they do is they record their lessons, okay, which I think all students should do. So that should be part of their scene. And what's good about that is they need to listen to themselves, okay? So the only way you can be sure that they're listening to themselves is to make them do a report, a little lesson report. And so he's very so he's look how my writing is not nearly that good. So and he's Chinese, so he lives in China. So he's, he wrote down some things. I told him about warming up, that, hey, warm up can be about 20 minutes, but very, very easy warm up, not in a hurry. Okay, so the reason why I gave him 20 minutes, so he's not, I explained to him, you got to work on the sound, you got to make a nice, rich, full sound. You have to do some soft, slow slurs, okay? And so that's something he wasn't doing, actually. And try to imagine hearing your sound. I say this a lot to my students, 360 degrees. So you hear yourself in front of you, behind you, to the sides. And anyway, and he wrote some goals here, which is great. This is what he's working on. So let's see, the rhythm and some etudes, certain music are needed to be completely accurate. A common is like play the 16ths and dotted notes, they sound like 30 seconds. Okay, the dotted 8th and 16th note, I have at least 3 or 4 lessons on just that rhythm to make sure they do it right. And then that's his assignment there. And he needs to know some English, so we talked, these are some words he has to know. The mouth cavity is, resonance and overtones. So I'm also his English teacher as well. So anyway, but he's worth the effort, for sure, because he's so interested in playing. He's very interested. And I just wanted to share that with you to show you that I do require a lesson report, even from a very young player who's I think mature enough to handle it. So
that's amazing.
Joe, I've got a question coming in from the internet here. Sure. And this one goes back to your articulation you were talking about a minute ago from Eric Johnson. He wanted to know, could Mr. Alessi talk about the different types of tonguing and how he would teach a faster tongue, not a harder tongue?
Right. Yeah. So for the faster tongue, I tend to move the tongue further back. Okay. So, and almost, starting to move towards the da syllable. So da. Okay, so so I'm going more towards a da syllable, and this way the tongue doesn't have to travel as far. Okay, so when you go da and ta, okay, ta is more distance to cover, I think, and slows you down. Okay, so the da is more on an angle, and it's allows you to have more facility in faster tongue.
Nice. We have another question here, and it's from Tom Bracy, who's on our Zoom right now. So, Tom, if you want to go ahead and ask Joe your question, that'd be great.
Sure, Joe. Everything you're saying is just such great advice for all of us and all of our students. I have younger students, 5th, 9th grade students. What advice do you have for them, and how do they keep practice exciting, especially in these early stages?
Well, one of the things I did, and well, first of all, always work on your students' posture. I, when I remember high school band and middle school band and so forth, we had the trombone players. Some of the postures that I would see was comical, very comical. Hand on the knee, and playing like this, and just all kinds of weird things. So I think that's one of the things I would do is try to teach everybody to sit tall when you sit on sit on the edge of your chair. So I even tell that to my college students, and I asked them to sit in the edge of the chair, and then I asked them to arch their back a little bit, okay, especially when you breathe in. Okay, so the back now is arched, and then I can really feel like I can support and have a little bit of power there. Um, but one of the things that I remember doing, I didn't have there was very few trombonists around, that played at my level. So I just started doing duets with myself. And I remember I had a little realistic or Radio Shack, um, cassette deck. And I just started, took a duet book, and it was a book of popular songs. Okay. And somebody I wish I could find that book again, but that Never on Sunday was in there. Da, 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 ba, do, da, that one. And there were little songs like that. And I just started, I said, wow, I can play these duets with myself. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And I did a lot of that type of thing. And my parents would come and say, wow, what are you doing? I thought this was amazing. And so it taught me some things. It taught me about intonation and where to place notes when you play duets, where there's an implied major chord and minor chords and so forth like this. And I kind of had a sort of an understanding about that. This one kid that I just mentioned, the Chinese kid, I was trying to tell him, or one of the etudes in the Voxman is a valse lentamente. And so I asked him, what does that mean? And he said, I don't know what that means. And I said, well, what does valse sound like? Well, it sounds like waltz. Good. I said, sing me the most famous waltz that you can sing me. And he said, well, I don't know any, so I said, do you know about Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker? He says, no, I don't know that. And says, so your assignment is to listen to the whole ballet, watch the whole ballet with the the Tchaikovsky Nutcracker, and he did, and I said, well, what did you think of it? Well, I liked the music, but I didn't like the dancing very much. So he did like the music, but he discovered about the waltz and what that's about, and so I was very happy about that. So that's one of the things I think that the students and the teachers can do, is just have a listening session. Can anybody know, just name what a waltz is, or name a famous waltz, or what is a polka, or can anybody give me an example of or name a great trumpet player, and this type of thing, and just have listening sessions, I think, with your students. It's a little bit of prep work on your end, but I think it's worth it to educate students of what instrumentalists of the past were famous, and for what, and even so, this kid that I'm teaching, I have him listen. I actually have him make a list of his favorite artists in each instrument. So, for instance, he has to name uh, two famous flute players and listen to something of that flute player, one of those flute players. And so, just to get him to listen, do some listening. And I think that would be a great thing to do, and to keep people motivated.
And Joe, this is maybe a follow-up question we've got. It may be a little bit broad, but kind of coincides with this. Someone wants to know, what in your mind makes a great student?
Well, I'm very good friends with my clarinet professor at University of Florida, my good friend Mitchell Estrin, who's from Chicago actually as well. But he played in the clarinet here in the New York Philharmonic as a sub, but was a sub every year and playing the whole year because the second clarinet player had an ailment. And so he went on tours, and we're really good friends. And we talked about, uh, you know, what makes a great student, and some students, no matter how hard you try, they just won't be great artists on the instrument. And there's that's something that you're either maybe born with that or not born with that. But our job is to not make them a great artist, but make them improve with what they have. And that's the only that's a I think kind of a liberating thing when we talked about that, and I said, hey, you don't have to make them a great artist. Not everybody's going to be a great artist on the instrument. But we can get them better from where they are, and help them to understand what to do. So yeah, the what was the question again? Say it one more time. Sorry. Apologize.
It was just a generic question. It was, what makes a great student?
Yeah. Well, a great student, number one, has innate uh, uh, just abilities, natural abilities to be a singer. Okay. I don't know how they know that, but sometimes they just appear that way. And they might learn it from singing as a young kid in choir. They might learn it from, playing in jazz band, or they might have a favorite artist that they listen to, and it inspires them. I mean, for me, that person was J.J. Johnson. When I was a young boy, I listened to, when J.J. played, I listened, I said, wow, that guy's singing on the instrument, and it sounds, his rhythm and pitch or just spoke to me. But so and a student who asks a lot of questions, okay, I like that. I like students who go to concerts and you don't have to tell them, you know. Um, I think that's a great trait. I can think back to a person like Kyle Covington, who plays first trombone in San Diego Symphony. He was always going to concerts. He would meet me after the show, and so, just so I really enjoyed that piece, and that was whatever. He was interested. And so our jobs, yeah, are trying to get our students interested in and interested in music. Um, I'm gonna give a shout out to Oscar Diaz down in Texas Tech. He has, pound for pound, they may not be uh, 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 as skilled as a Juilliard student, but man, he knows how to inspire students. And so I ask him how he does it. He just says, well, I just get them all fired up, try to get them fired up, and give them challenging things to do, but and that sounds easier said than done, but he's doing something else. So I'm inviting him to be on a Juilliard, give a Juilliard masterclass, and just talk more in depth about this. And I've showed my own students, what they're doing down there at the what he's at Texas A&M. It's called,
Yeah,
what is it
Kingsville.
called? Kingsville. Yeah. And when I went down there, I said, wow, I'm going to go to Kingsville. What could be going on down there? And a lot is going down there at that school. So it's quite something.
Yeah, they do an amazing job. Hey, Joe, we've had a few questions that would be really nice to maybe touch on. This came from Bart, so I'm going to let him ask it, but we've had another 2 or 3 people ask a very similar question. So Bart, if you want to go ahead and ask the question, that'd be great.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Joe, I teach mostly middle school age students and wondered what kind of suggestions you have for developing tone quality and what kind of tips or exercises or ways to approach it, how you like to approach it.
Right. So, a middle school player, they've probably been playing for maybe 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, in some cases we actually start 7th grade beginners, so they're 6-8 months into it. And this year, in the unique situation, started fully virtual, so it's even been more challenging. We're lucky we get to see them now in person. So,
right. Well, it's a little bit how I teach my own students about sound, and when you come to Juilliard, you have a good sound. However, it's not fully developed, and it's not. It has to be tweaked a bit. So some students, of course, I'll just leave them alone, but to a much smaller degree, I'm doing basically the same thing, and would tell a young students the same, which is, you can first of all, number one thing, keep a flat chin, and point your chin. Point the chin is very important, because if you don't, then this happens. Okay, and once the lower lip goes underneath the top lip, game over. Okay, for high register, for a lot of things. Now there are funky embouchures out there that work, and if they sound great, leave them alone. But look at Dick Nash, for God's sakes. He played way down here, and sounded great. And I've had other students that have had strange embouchures, and as long as they can do what they need to do, I just leave them alone. But anyway, yeah. So the placement of the mouthpiece, I think, in general, is not where Dick Nash plays. That's not the common place to play. So I remember my father putting mouthpieces on people's faces, and he said, play here. And it was a very interesting look on the student's face. So yeah, 2/3 upper, 1/3 lower is standard. Doesn't work for everybody, but the one thing and corners, have the students use their corners, and if you see any air pockets there, try to show them how to get rid of that. So what I have them do for air pockets, I use the mouthpiece. Okay, I find that people with air pockets don't do that with the mouthpiece. It's interesting how that works. So the perception of playing, when think about it, when you're playing an instrument for the first time, what you did, and what the quintessential look is on a student. They do this like that. Okay, the first time you blow a trombone, or they think it takes so much force, and so they puff their cheeks. So anyway, I'm really against any air pockets in the embouchure, and so I'll just have them use the mouthpiece, and just whistle also, if they can whistle, or just blow. Okay, but as far as the sound, also, sorry, for the mouthpiece, I have them go to a piano, or I'll give the piano, hit any note on the piano. I said, buzz that note. And so buzzing the right note with the mouthpiece is essential for great tone. But here's the thing: when you blow, most people don't understand that the teeth, the space between your teeth has something to do with the tone. Okay, so most young students will not have this form. They'll do this, and their space between the teeth is very small. Okay, so I had one teacher early on. He had a pencil. He just put it there. Said, try to think of that. You know, try to think of just a small aperture about the size of the pencil. This is too thick. But and also what I tell my students is gravitate to the bottom part of the note. Okay, so when you gravitate to the bottom part of the note, there's a couple things that happen. One is you'll get a richer sound. Okay, and it's a little bit like the old radios. Okay, so the old radios, you had the dial, and then you could try to get the station from all the way across Illinois if you just touched it just slightly. Okay, and then if you touched it too hard, you lost it. So it's a little bit like that, trying to find your sound, just dialing it in, and the adjustments are, you know, play a little bit lower with a little bit more, your teeth a little bit more open, and a slower airstream, a thicker airstream, thicker air column. Okay, opposed to somebody who has a closed teeth setting, blows the pitch higher and uses air that's fast and small. Okay, so that's how you kind of fix, and you can do it by tone bending. Okay, so you can just start, you know, ask the student, hey, play me the highest pitch you can play on a high B flat. Okay. Okay, now play me the lowest pitch. Okay, well, somewhere in there is your sound, you know, and then okay, let's do a little less radical, and you just get them to think in you know, huge spectrums like that, and then you just dial it in that way.
Thanks, Joe. Hey, Joe, Ben Source here has a question. Ben, are you here?
I'm here. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah.
I had a question about if you have any insight or if you have any feedback about a situation that I have with a student, and recently braces have gone on, and it has not been a smooth transition for this student of mine. Everything feels foreign. We're just struggling with regaining that sense of embouchure formation, where to place the mouthpiece. It's just like brand new. And I'm wondering if you've experienced that, or what tips you have.
Well, I don't have a lot of tips. The only thing I could tell you is that my dad, watching him teach so many beginners, you know, he had wax. He had dental wax, and he put the wax, you know, we would have the student, you know, and I don't know how maybe he had a supply of it, and he handed it out to his students, I think, but he put this wax right on there so it wouldn't cut, you know, and after that, it's just kind of grin and bear it, you know. It's going to feel uncomfortable, and you're going to, you know, I think the students just kept going, you know, they kept going and they just dealt with it. And hey, this is not going to feel good for a long time. But a lot of his students would keep playing. And I did have one student at Juilliard who had something like that. It could have been my great student, Giuseppe, who is one of the top students in the class. It could be that when he first came to me, he had some kind of braces, and maybe somebody else, but they just kind of dealt with it. They put, I think they had some kind of wax or something like that, but so I wish I had any better advice, but that's all I remember from that. I don't encounter it very often. So, what do you do exactly? Do you have the students play with any wax or anything like that, or?
You know, the issue that my students having isn't as much one of pain or discomfort. It's purely just more about setup, physical setup. But as an aside, I mean, for comfort, I'm pretty fond of the Morgan bumper. It seems to be like a less intrusive approach than wax in my own experience.
Yeah, well, that was years ago when he did wax. So yeah, I'm sure they have something else by now.
Hey, Joe, we had a great question that came in from Daniel on Facebook, and he said, "Greetings from the studio of Thomas Ashworth in Minnesota.
Oh, nice.
But he'd love to know what other musicians, trombone players, or other instruments do you base your own tone color and stylistic ideas off of, whether you're playing tenor, alto, jazz, or in other scenarios?" And Dave Sporny said it really well. Who are your sonic heroes?
Oh, well, okay. Well, obviously J.J. Johnson. You know, I've mentioned him many, many times. I got to record with him. I was so happy. It was a dream come true towards the end of his life. Um, um, Bass trombone, I love George Roberts. You know, that quintessential sound. Um, uh, my own sounds probably come from my mother. You know, my mother was a great singer. She had such sonic, uh, clear, focused tone, but very lyrical, very singing. You know, so I you know, I've in the past I've played my mother's uh, you know, recordings for when she was at the Met, but you could hear what I mean, you know, just the lyricism and um, but I also think my father had something to do with this too. One thing I want to say about the sound and so forth is he always stressed an immediate sound. Okay, so he had me practice those exercises in Arbonnes that go like this, and he said get a ping. He wanted I'd like you to get a bell or ping sound. So like that, and just to get this immediate sound. And that's one of the things also that I think you must teach early on is to get the right shape of note. Okay, so many times in college we get this type of thing, even in college students. So this kind of reverse note shape, I call it, and so that's something to practice, even for into your professional life. You know, just practice getting the air out on time so that you end up with a big sound and then it decays, rather than a note that starts out small and gets big. So that's something I think is really important. But yeah, my dad had a nice fat sound. You know, he played on the record, the Gunther Schuller's Symphony for Brass, when Gunther Schuller recorded that the first time in New York. But he had he had a nice fat sound, so I probably got that from him as well. And listening to Luciano Pavarotti, I think, was also hugely inspirational, and to the point where I would sing along with him in the car, trying to sound like him, and unsuccessfully. But you know, listening to Glenn Dotson, listening to my teachers, Mark Lawrence, and just had those people had a lot of influence on my tone concept.
And Joe, can you maybe go in? We're talking about tone. The horns that you're developing now, the Q Alessi, we've had a number of those come in the store, and they're just tremendous. And the sound on those are so special and so unique. Do you have any, you know, when you were developing that, did you have that? What was going through your mind?
Well, yeah, I mean, I started out, as you know, on a Bach horn, and then I went to Edwards, and now I'm with Shires. So, but there was a horn that Glenn Dotson gave me, a Bach, that had some different metals. You know, had a gold, had um, a gold brass gooseneck, okay, and I believe it had a different crook on the end, maybe a nickel silver. And anyway, just picking the right alloys in the right places, I think produces a different sound. So I didn't go into any instrument company ever and said, hey, put this on here. I wouldn't know what to do. So it's really just from trial and error that through, you know, working with Steve Shires initially at Edwards, and also again we worked briefly together when I arrived at Shires, and he had the knowledge about all that stuff. You know, it wasn't me. And so he said, hey, try this. And, you know, when I had the right combination of alloys in the right places, it spoke to me. And so this horn just spoke to me, and then that's what I play. And so based on those recommendations from Steve.
Thanks, Joe. I've got a couple other, we've got the Facebook, we've got people from all over the world, New Zealand, Nova Scotia, everywhere.
Wow.
But there's a couple of themes, Joe, that are popping up. There's a couple of people asking about the low register, how to just kind of relax and open up in the low register. But then there's also a couple other people asking about the high register, tension, and I guess they're having problems with tension in the high register. So if you could maybe just go on those two.
I make my most of my money in the high register, so I'll talk about that first. I'm more qualified to talk about that, I think. Well, yeah. Again, these are concepts that I learned early on, blowing through the bottom note. You know, so it's not the top note that's important; it's the note before that's important. Using syllables. I'm huge on every teacher that I had early on taught me syllables. Okay, so da yi always. And, you know, do I manipulate the tongue? No, not really. But I just think if I think those syllables, then I can do what I need to do. So if I do that Zarathustra thing, so. Right, just to slur up to the high D, it's the bottom note and saying ta-yi, okay? And so when I sing to my students, I'm always so dot 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 dee dot 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 dot. So I'm always doing the top note, dot 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 dee, like that. And I'm always having them sing. When they sing, they have to sing back with those same syllables. So the syllables and the different vowels have huge impact on your high register. Okay, and I could go into, you know, a lot of technical reasons why that happens, but the tongue has, you know, does probably change position, I'm sure, and I know it does. But I don't think about, hey, move your tongue. I don't think that. I just think the syllable, and then it makes it work automatically. So, and obviously that does affect the speed of the air. So speed of the air, I had one teacher a long time ago, he said, you know, pucker. Instead of smile, pucker. And I'll never forget that. That was very, very helpful. Try to keep more lip in the mouthpiece, not take lips out of the mouthpiece. Okay, so you want vibrating surface. I know this is weird, but do sit there in front of a mirror and just make an embouchure like this and hold it and stare at it, you know, and something like that can really help the student to understand the structure of what goes on here, so that we're not, again, like I said, this is a high range killer is bottom lip going underneath the top lip. Okay, so you can learn that just by holding your embouchure and memorizing that place, just right there. Low register, it's my face, everybody's face works differently. Okay, so I'm not recommending anything except for myself mostly, but you know, so I have a kind of a crooked face to be honest, and I'm very right side oriented, so I've had to engage my left side. I know that sounds weird, but I've had to engage my left side to compensate sometimes. And when you see pictures of me as a young kid, I'm smiling like this. Okay, with my everything is pulled to this right side, and so I've had to work on that with the left side. So I'm as far as pedal notes, I can safely say I'm pretty good at those. Um, and what I try to do is fill in the gap every day between the pedal B flat and the low B flat, and and so or an F. Well, I would say yeah, pedal B flat and up an octave, and I'm working on that in my warm-ups. I work on it with you know, with my tonguing. So I'm constantly working on those things and how to get my face to work properly. So it does involve engaging, you know, right and left side for me, as well as my jaw, of course. But I love to do the pedal. Sorry, I love to do the glissandi exercise for young kids. Just start out doing this. So I had a kid the other day on my webinar. He's amazing. He's from Spain, I believe, or Portugal, and I believe that anyway, he's probably the most talented youngster I've ever seen. I think he's maybe 8 years old, but he plays a couple different instruments. He conducts, he composes, and anyway, so I was trying to get working on his low register, and I realized that he can only get out to about fourth position comfortably. I said, well, you know, please try this passage and just gliss from low B flat to F, and he couldn't do it. So I said, hey, just only go to G. And so I think just the idea of the glissandi, going very slow and using glissandi to expand your range is great. So especially, yeah, while going up as well. Right. And so I'm constantly using that to just very slowly. I don't have all day tonight, but I don't have a lot of time tonight because I know we have to run, but I would have them do it so slow and take many breaths to help them, you know, just get to the next level. The one other story I do remember is helping somebody with their high range, and it was kind of a mental block for this person. Um, and I tried pretty much every trick in the book, but what I did is, and it was the first time I ever did it, and I would use it again. It says, "What is your favorite melody?" And he said, "Well, it has to be Princess Leia's theme song." You know, you all know that, so. And so on. So I said, okay, bring me um, that melody in a register that you know you can hit the highest note, and you can just simply not worry and just sing and have a great time. And he did. He wrote it out. Yes, thank you. And yeah, and so he did that, and I said, great. I said, okay, now bring it back to me a half step higher next week. But I just want you to keep singing, keep having fun with it. It's, you know, put all your heart and soul into it. And he did that. He got a half step higher, and before you knew it, after about 3 or 4 weeks, he was playing higher than he ever played before, and very nicely. So he just did it through his mind and singing. So I think there's a lot of that can happen in teaching as well. That you know, have a students write out something, have them play it in a legato way. I would say if you're going to work on your high register or your low register, to do it melodically. Don't just sit there and play high notes. Bop, bop. No, you're going to kill yourself. But so have the student do things in a melodic way and just transpose things down or up to the uncomfortable register.
That's awesome. So I think maybe just time for one last question because we're a little bit past our time now. And I know we had a lot of people who are watching and writing in. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. That's absolutely fantastic. We're thrilled to have you. But Joe, it'd be great if we could talk a little bit maybe about scales and scale practice. And we've had a lot of questions about some of your new practice tools. So that might be a great way to kind of bring it all together, whether you're a brass player or you're teaching, winds or strings even. How do you approach scale practice? And maybe tell us a little bit about your new tool.
Yeah, well, it's just a fun little thing. It's this is you could certainly make one of these at home, but I think this is fun. It's a little spongy and nice. It fits in your case, and I can tell you that when I bring this to the lessons, the students, since I've been bringing this to the lessons, the students have learned their scales, and they know all their scales. So because they don't want to be caught off guard, you flip it in the air, and okay, play a G minor scale, and it's random, So of course I could just say play G minor, I could just say that, but this makes it more fun, and also, anyway, it's something that you can work on, not scales, but you can work on your just chord patterns and so forth. So if you're going to do D minor seventh, okay, play D minor seventh in addition to playing the D scale. So anyway, and then we expanded that. Well, first of all, scales, I should say, are something that I didn't practice enough of those when I was younger, and so I'm making up for lost time. I practice scales all the time, and but we expanded it with excerpts as well. So if you flip it up in the air, okay, now I have to play. Well, this is bass trombone, or somewhere around. Oh, here it is. Okay, so here's. Okay, I have to play tuba. Now you have to play tuba mirum, and so forth. So that's kind of a fun little thing, and yeah, it's a good stocking stuffer or something that you could, if you want to send a message to a student, say, hey, I'm going to bring this into the lesson every week, and you're going to have to play a scale. It works.
Joe, I can tell you from personal experience. I've got my son who's 6, and he's just learning how to play piano, and he loves this thing. So he was playing E major yesterday. I don't think I was older than 6 when I was playing E major scales, but I could see, these going in band rooms all over the place. There's so many cool little features that you can do with these things. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Well, tonight was an incredible event. So thank you to you, Joe, for being a part of this, and thanks to Quinlan and Fabish and Windy City Trombones. Thanks to George Quinlan and Kevin Brown and Travis and the whole team over there. We had an amazing group of educators on this Zoom. So thanks to everybody who tuned in and asked questions here. And also to everybody on Facebook. We had really fantastic, record-breaking attendance on this. So that was really, really fun to see and to hear from people from, like Kevin said, all over the place. Portugal and New Zealand and just everywhere, just all over the place.
I'm sorry I didn't get to hear from the panel as much as I'd like to, but maybe we can do this again sometime.
I'm sure everybody would be thrilled.
Oh, we would love to, Joe. Yeah, again, I wanted to thank you, Joe and Sam, everybody at Team Shires. Windy City Trombones, we're in part of Quinlan and Fabish, which has 9 stores in Chicago, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan. So if anybody wants to come to one of our locations, try out a Q Series horn, we're doing specials, $100 off all month long, and you get a cool little souvenir from Joe. But we're so excited to have had you here, Joe. I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, well, I want to shout out to all the wonderful educators here tonight, and I hope to, touch base with you at a later date. And I know I will definitely be at Midwest next December with brass band of Battle Creek, and actually with Oscar Diaz's trombone choir. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, great. Well, thank you to our panel. Thanks everybody for coming in, and everybody on Facebook too. So we really appreciate all of your attendance. So, and thank you
Thanks,
again,
everyone.
Joe.
Yep. Thanks to all everybody. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.